A big welcome to our live audience for Digital Health Investor Talk. I'm your host, Stephen Wardell. I'm the managing partner of Wardell Advisors, a digital health advisory firm, and the author of The Future of Digital Health. Wardell Advisors is helping digital health companies address issues around growth, fundraising, trade sales, and strategic alternatives, giving you more options in today's challenging environment. You can follow me at x.com/Stephen Wardell. Our show topic today is a solution for high healthcare costs. Our guest is Matthew Holt. Matthew is the president of SMAC Consulting and a healthcare curmudgeon. He is best known as the founder of Health 2.0 and the Healthcare blog. Matthew is our most repeat guest on this show. This show is being recorded and will be included in my podcast series called Digital Health Investor Talk. Subscribe to our podcast on Apple and Spotify and leave us a review. We have new podcast links in the show, so make sure that you go to the new links and subscribe and not the old pages for the show. Here's the format of today's show. It's 60 minutes, and Matthew and I will spend the first half talking about news and the macro picture and some other topics, and then for the second half, we'll focus on the topic of the show. And we'll be taking your questions throughout in LinkedIn. So Matthew, welcome to the show, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, Stephen. It's good to be back. It's been a while because you have a lot more hair now than you used to. And I think I probably have rather even less. We'll see how it goes. So I'm Matthew Holt. As Stephen mentioned, used to run the Health 2.0 conference. I have forever run the healthcare blog, and I spend a lot of time on Twitter and LinkedIn. You're calling it X. Musk has got you. I still think it's called Twitter. Essentially, my role most of the time is helping relatively early stage startups figure out how to present themselves, raise money, and generally survive the experience, which isn't that easy of trying to get somewhere in this digital health.
That's great. Well, so moving on to our first topic, Rock Health has just released their quarterly fundraising report. And this report was, to me, a disappointment. Now, I've been hearing, if you cycle back to the first quarter, people felt that the fundraising environment was just terrible and it would remain that way for the whole year. And I started hearing rumblings of a pickup in digital health investment deals, so number of deals and amount of funding in total in the marketplace in the beginning of the third quarter. And I've been talking on this show about that. But now the data are out and the data show it's relatively flat and down a little bit. So the deal size is the same. The number of deals is a little lower. So a total of $2.4 billion in funding across 110 deals. That's a little down from prior quarters. And the Rock Health report is calling it focused funding. And this is in spite of certain other factors like the stock market indices are at record highs that would usually suggest that investors have more confidence, and the Fed stopped raising rates and then started lowering rates. And despite that, we have deals are flat or down in terms of number of deals. So Matthew, what were you seeing? And so I'm less confident now. I have a view out there that we're going to see an uptick in number of deals for the year of 25% by the end of the year. I'm less confident in that view now because of this third quarter report by Rock Health. Matthew, what are you seeing? Did you expect this because the funding environment is just tough, or are you disappointed by this report as well?
I mean, the overall problem, right, is the public markets, and it stays that way. So, yes, it's true that I'm actually sitting in Seattle, and sadly I can't show the people the beautiful view because then I would be like in witness protection moment because it's beautiful. It's a beautiful view over Seattle out here. I'm at a conference about AI. We've had people from Microsoft and OpenAI and others talking about it. It's really fascinating. I'm actually a bunch of lawyers figuring out how AI is going to impact medicine legally as well as so there is a huge amount of activity clearly in AI in healthcare, but also outside of health. If you look at what's funding the stock market, I mean, a lot of other stuff has gone up, but in general, the stock market is relatively flat. If you pull out the big tech players who are in AI, there isn't really a pure play healthcare AI company that there are a couple in the ambient, in the private markets. They're only in the public markets that I can see. If you look at the public markets, and you've got only 6 or 7 companies now above $1 billion in valuation in the digital health space. You can squint hard and say that Tempus is a digital health company. That's a bit of a cheat. if you ask me. But the sort of the stalwarts have been there now in the public market for some time, right? Well, in Teladoc's case, since 2014, 15, and then even in and even like Doximity's case and some of the others, 2019, 2020, 2021 period. Most of those, the SPACs almost all died a horrible death, and the rest of them are so far off their highs, right? They're so far off their 2021 highs or 2020 highs, but also they're way down below. Still they had a bad 2022, and 2023 wasn't great either. And now some of them are just recovering a little bit. And most of their valuations are worth less than some of the private market valuations you're seeing for companies behind them, or newer companies who don't have, who've raised a lot of money and are still raising some amount of money, but aren't yet profitable. And, conceivably, if they went on the public market, it might be worth, the comparisons might make them be worth less. So I think it's a very tough spot. And, the really big numbers, right? I think Rock Health said it was 18 billion that top year, that in 2022, and Startup Health said it was 30 billion. What those really big numbers for that year? I forget the exact numbers, which were double the year before, which had been double the year before, and then it came down basically. I think they were all driven by huge late equity rounds from Tiger and people, 200 million here, 300 billion there. And companies like Olive raising, 800 million very quickly, and then obviously went out of business. I think if you strip all that out, what we've got is about, we're doing a little bit better than we were doing in 2023, but I can't see a reason why these big late rounds are going to happen. But yesterday we had one, right? We had one into Maven, which was 125 million into a company allegedly of $1.75 billion value. Which is a bit more than its competitor Progeny is worth on the public market. So I know Progeny's lost market cap recently because Maven stole its contract with Amazon, but I'm still, that to me means that for that round to double and get out, they've got to somehow end up at a $3 to $4 billion valuation when they go public, and that to me is going to be tough. So I'm still a bit concerned about these late rounds. I'm seeing a decent amount of activity kind of back in what looks like 2016, 17, 18 style, early rounds where you're getting 5 million, 8 million, 20 million, 30 million. That seems to be bubbling along. Investors are a bit more confident they were. I'm just still unsure as to how, until we have some kind of clear out or a sentiment change in the public digital health market, which really means those public companies starting to, figure out their business models and become profitable. I mean, really only Doximity still is the only one that's got a business model that's profitable. Till that happens, I don't know how we exit. I wrote a piece called Digital Health. There is no exit. Unless the private equity people have got some clue as to selling their private equity stake to some other private equity stake. I'm not optimistic that we're going to go back anywhere close to what we saw in terms of VC a few years back. And, I'm not massively confident the overall market, other than AI, and, AI is this bubble in and of itself. For what it's worth, I know it's getting off the topic a bit. The talk I heard this morning from like an amazing researcher at Microsoft, who's working with OpenAI, is that it looks like, the growth in what the LLMs can do is going to be exponential, and it's going to really, he showed us basically the exponential growth from 2019 to now is amazing, and the next 5 years will be more amazing. Who knows what this stuff will be doing, and maybe it really will restructure how many professions are done. We see the dock workers on strike because of automation and et cetera, et cetera. I think, though, that digital health, this is a much longer answer than you wanted. Digital health is going to be stuck where it is in terms of the attraction of relatively early stage deals.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks. And we have seen some stories in the press about how some very serious companies are looking at expanding the size of nuclear power plants in America so that they can put an AI server center right down next to it.
Yeah.
And when one of these AI server centers with GPU chips in it opens up in a mid-sized American city, like outside of Austin or something, instantly becomes the largest consumer of electricity in the city. And
I won't try to repeat it because I will mangle it, but I had the explanation this morning about why that's required. But there are things that smart people and smart AI researchers and using AI to do this are actually going to do to try to sort of skip to the answer. This is all about the language models, the number of tokens the language models use. It was complex, but there are clever things that might be done to reduce the amount of that electricity demand. But it's clear that right now there's literally a nuclear arms race in AI service. You've got to, which is why NVIDIA is doing so well, because everyone's saying they can charge what they like for their chips, and they're the only game. So, which
the joke I've heard is that
about a year ago. No.
The joke I've heard is that NVIDIA is currently making 200% of the profits in the entire AI sector.
More than that, probably, because if you think about the amount that is being put in just by Meta, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, and their subsidiaries. Forget what the VC funds, and yet you have OpenAI able to raise $6 billion without even thinking about it. So I don't know that at some point, right, the AI thing will permeate into will permeate properly into every business workflow, and then we'll figure out what the real demand for it is, and then who gets what money and how much, But right now, clearly no one gets an arms race. Can we make sure that we're there at the end? And they're willing to spend whatever it takes, and it looks like 1999, but actually on a bigger scale.
And for our audience, feel free you've got with you here Matthew Holt, who is the author of There Is No Exit in Digital Health, and who is the top curmudgeon on publicly traded digital health companies. So feel free to ask your questions. And
I'm not sure that's an actual title you just made up.
Paolo has just said massive change to healthcare is coming sooner than we think. Yeah, very interesting to see that certain things the AI can do in healthcare. Of course, we're talking about the new wave of generative AI that's 2 years old in the public mind at this point. But I think the most useful framework for me, Paolo, there I've heard comes from Ron Razmi, who wrote a book called AI Doctor, very insightful. And he creates a spectrum that he calls the risk to life spectrum. And on one end of that is administrative tasks, which are very burdensome, very expensive, and very wasteful in healthcare. And he thinks that AI is going to really be able to tackle that in the near term. On the other end is high risk to human life. And there you're going to see people are going to want doctors, be willing to pay for doctors. A regulatory environment is going to be anti-AI on that side. The thing about AI in risk to human life, in diagnosis or in care planning, is that AI is a black box and it can't explain itself and it makes things up. But other than that, though, it's great.
You say that, but it's now like ChatGPT 4 has passed the US medical license exam with 80%. 2 years ago, it was only getting it wasn't getting a passing grade. So that's pretty impressive increase. And I think this will be worked out. My and this actually will blend into what we'll talk about later, is that the structure of how we pay for American healthcare, hasn't changed in a very long time, and doctors might do better doctoring using AI. And it's possible organizations might use AI to save some money in the back end admin stuff. But I don't think it really changes how we're thinking about structuring and working on American healthcare, and that's why I don't see a massive change to the system. What actually I am kind of getting to the point where there was a discussion this morning at this conference I was in about patients now coming in. There'll be a patients panel this afternoon, which has got Laura Jantos and Dana Lewis and some people on it, talking about when patients, and ePatient Dave has been writing about this, talk about you Boston folks, when patients start using these tools, it's making them very powerful, right? So it's changing that patient-doctor relationship. Probably as much, again, as the original, we can get online and talk to each other, patients like me, or we can, use the internet to look at, clinical sources and become smarter, more involved patients. That's probably happening again in quite a big way. And obviously we know that clinicians, the other huge changes coming is that the LLMs are very good at, giving you an answer that you can interpret based on what it knows. And there's no possible way that clinicians can know what about the body of the change in the body of medical knowledge, because it's been happening so quickly and continues to exponentially increase. So I think it's very powerful tools. I think we're probably a little way away, but we can see in some industries where, the self-driving cars that I see on the streets of San Francisco are getting better and better. So, you can start to see some industries that, the dock workers are on strike. for good, to try and keep the stuff out. The screen actors were on strike to try and keep the stuff out. You know that historically that only stays, that trying to hold back the dike only works so well in those cases. So, it's coming to healthcare, and Paolo's right. How it changes the structure of healthcare is a big question.
The metaphor that I've seen used for this across all industry is called race against the machine. And this comes from Andrew McAfee and Eric Brynjolfsson. Yeah. They talk about race against the machine. And the idea is that several years ago, before we called it generative AI, computers could write the most basic newspaper stories as well as first-year reporters. And so that meant that there were fewer first-year reporters, and they had trouble advancing in their careers. And then a couple of years later, now computers can write stories as well as a 5-year reporter. And they start doing financial analysis as well as a first-year financial analyst. And so you're racing against the machine. If you're lucky to get into a career, advance rapidly, know and be known by people who are going to be your source of future job leads, get known for some difficult skills or whatever, then you raced against the machine and you won for now. But there's plenty of people who weren't that lucky. They might be in the first couple of years of their career, they might be farther than that. And they're facing this great difficulty that some decision maker is going to say, I could outsource this to India, or I could give it to AI. And people who are in the prime of their career with unique skills, that there's still demand for them, but they can get a lot more done. They don't have to have 7 people supporting them who they're also training to replace them in the future. They could have 2 people supporting them, and those other 5 jobs are gone, and those people are not advancing in their careers in that area anymore. So that's coming to healthcare as well.
No, I agree. And I was at the panel, the discussion, the conference I'm at, which is called Digital Health Council, run by Dave Skillcroft out here in Seattle. It's about, what does this do to lawyers, right? There's a lot of discussion about, well, you think about people who basically give you opinions based on facts that they know and you don't, including lawyers, maybe pundits, advisors, investment advisors, I don't know. You can imagine, right, the AI can know a lot more than all of us pretty soon, and you just have to sort of figure out how to tune that opinion. We're all as vulnerable as Uber drivers and dock workers and, to some extent, screenwriters. I don't think that anybody's safe. The thing we don't know, Stephen, and whether it's different this time, is that you go back through, 300 years, 500 years of human history. We've had people who did, 150 years ago, we all worked on a farm. 200 years ago, we all worked on a farm. Right, because then that got replaced by tractors, and instead, and then people were making horse and buggies and harnesses for horses, and that all got replaced by cars. We found other stuff to do, right? As we mechanized, we found, and this has been going on for many years. I mean, go back to the dock workers, right? They went from, loading the ships themselves to containers, which took fewer workers, and there are fewer people doing dock work. And now, the comparison between the dock workers in the US and the ones in Shanghai and the Netherlands who, do more who do more dock work with far, far fewer people because it's all been automated. That's a familiar story. What we haven't quite seen is this come at, I would call, intellectual professions, doctors, lawyers, bloggers, journalists, whatever, to that extent. And we don't quite know where that's going to go. And we also, and this is far beyond the remit of you and me on this talk show, is we haven't really figured out societally how we're going to figure out how to distribute the money. And if all the money goes to Elon Musk and the good shareholders of Google and Facebook, and the rest of us have nothing to do, and no source of viable income, that's going to be a problem. And don't forget, the people who do those professions tend to be a lot louder and more active in the political sphere than, the poor person who lost their job in the textile mill or whatever it was because that went to China. Not that they weren't loud, but that. So when you see a lot of unemployed lawyers and doctors, you'll hear about that very quickly.
Yeah, one of the stories of the original American Revolution of 1776 was that the crown pissed off America's lawyers, basically, with taxes on legal documents. With the stamp tax was a tax not on stamps, the stamps that were put on legal documents you had to pay the crown for in order to be a lawyer and do business as a lawyer. And so what happens when
more lawyers now than there were then?
Yeah.
Anyway.
So Wynn asks, is cybersecurity an issue? This is in the AI context. And I'll just say, cybersecurity doesn't become a much bigger issue in an AI context. In fact, cybersecurity is a very big issue. And in general, like a $10 billion a year revenue hospital spends less on cybersecurity than a $10 billion a year Fortune 500 company. Healthcare underspends on cybersecurity, even though arguably the data that healthcare is guarding is more sensitive and more valuable than the data that your typical Fortune 500 company is guarding. So cybersecurity remains a big issue. I would say that possibly one new area is people's questions. If someone is asking questions, they will reveal to Google that they have cancer. They'll reveal to Google that they have an STD or something. And so that's an area already true of search engines traffic, but that's a new area.
It kind of could say exactly that has come up a lot of this conference about, because we have a bunch of hospital lawyers, counsel for, startups and a bunch of people who practice AI. And apparently a lot of young doctors are saying, well, let me shove this part of the medical note into ChatGPT, and maybe there's either actual personal health information attached to the question because of the way they've collected the note, or maybe because they can, you could figure out enough information that somebody at the other end can figure out who that person is. But that's certainly something that needs to be worked out by hospitals. But then don't forget, Commodore Garden ransomware has taken down numerous hospitals, taken down Change Healthcare, and we're the biggest company in healthcare, United Health Group. We've already, this problem, it's not a new problem. We're like right in the thick of it, and it's only going to get worse.
Thank you. And so Brad asks a question, is there outcome fatigue going on here, which is so many digital health companies haven't lived up to their promise? And so that's a really good point, Brad. I know there are VCs who are very concerned about this. They tend to frame this in terms of exits for their capital rather than success for the products. But this is concerning. So software is eating the world, and healthcare is a sector where software has eaten the least so far, and therefore has the farthest still to go. And that's usually seen as a sign that it's a gold mine. There's a lot of opportunity in healthcare, but there's also unique problems, such as that the system doesn't involve consumers very well or directly, but consumers need to buy into behavior change for outcomes to be successful. And then consumers don't change their behavior, and outcomes are not successful. And all this money was spent on healthcare to have providers behave differently or payers behave differently, and then the consumers don't play along, and don't do what they're supposed to in healthcare. And also, things tend to cost more and take longer in healthcare. An investor that's putting money in healthcare, they might have been better served putting their money in B2B or B2C, but they're thinking that healthcare is somehow a more pioneer territory in healthcare, and has other opportunities. But healthcare has those unique problems. So,
yeah,
Matthew, maybe we should be talking.
I just add really quickly that there's a lot. I think there's actually a lot of activity in technology in healthcare. The problem is that I'm guilty as hell for hoping this and maybe cheerleading it too much, is that a lot of the money that was invested was intended to be what I call the Amazon versus Barnes & Noble issue. So if you go back to, 1993, Jeff Bezos shows up at John Doerr at Kleiner Perkins and says, hey, I've got this cool new thing. You can buy a book online. And, he doesn't say, John Doerr didn't say, great, let's go sell this to Barnes & Noble or sell the ordering system to Kmart. They said, let's build a company and put those bastards out of business. And that's what they did. And a lot of people thought in healthcare, if we could get, what I call the cats versus dogs thesis, if we could get, this is not about Donald Trump and eating them. This is about the cats staying in a home and a place and the dogs moving around liking the people. If we could have got records and tools and technologies to be around people rather than big centralized places, we might have moved healthcare more quickly and enabled more creation of more different delivery systems. And you see all these people come in promising to do a sort of different version of healthcare delivery, tech-enabled, who just didn't get it together, didn't stay the course, didn't have the funding, whatever. And the companies that were big hospitals that grew and merged and put in, stable systems like Epic for their big, which is now the dominant system for their own hospitals, they have maintained their strength over the course. They've grown, and the big insurance companies have grown, the big fund companies. There's been big incumbent growth in terms of the amount they're doing. Now, they are, many of them, experimenting with new technologies and the rest of it, but it's not like we saw the equivalent of Amazon putting a whole bunch of retail people out of business, or Apple changing how music was done, or whatever. We thought we might get that in healthcare, we didn't. Therefore, it's been very hard to see those kind of exits. So now now if you're a digital health company, your best bet is to try to be a vendor to somebody who's in a relatively low margin business and has a very powerful position in that business and doesn't want to give it up to you. And to me, that's why, the outcome fatigue is that it's been any number of companies, Stephen, you and I have seen over the last decade and a half, who were going to do something that was going to change in healthcare, deliver a whole new system, put a patient community together that was going to develop new drugs, or be a online hybrid care system that was going to deliver care in a whole new different way. So many failures in that area. And the people who are doing well are kind of like supplying stuff to the guts of Mayo Clinic or Sutter, Mass General. So I think there is activity, but it's at their pace, not at the new pace.
Well, we have more questions, but I want to jump to just touch briefly on a couple topics and then get to our main topic. And I take it that you have a hard stop at 60 minutes. Is that right?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So then I just want to call out, I think, a very important article. Alyssa Jaffe, who's a partner at Seven Wire, and Chrissy Farr, well known in our sector, was a partner at OMERS. They published a piece saying that we're about to see a consolidation wave in digital health. Now, they're under consolidation in digital health for over 15 years. And so people were hoping to see this. And their thesis is that incumbents, they cite Lilly, United, and HCA, have grown enormously in the last 5 years. They're over 100% bigger than they were at the start of this period. And that to get their attention to matter to them, you're going to have to see vendors consolidate. And our sector is full of a sector where I call it, remember the dot-com boom of 1999? There were 11 well-funded online dog food companies. And then which of them won? And the answer is none of them won. Amazon won. And so we have that phenomenon in digital health of the 11 well-funded, formerly well-funded, now a bit, stretching it, companies. And they're going to have to merge with each other in order to be able to sell into the very large incumbent and matter to them. And I hadn't seen this before. I think I agree with it. And my own view is that in certain sectors, software buyers are demanding, have matured in their demands, and they want enterprise solutions, and they want they want to buy suites. And so those vendors who sell into them are going to have to consolidate with certain large vendors having leadership positions and buying a few of the small vendors and putting together suites and enterprise solutions. So I agree with them I also have different reasons. So Matthew, in the next 2 years, do you agree with me and Alyssa Jaffe and Chrissy Farr that we're going to see a big consolidation wave, or no?
We'll see some, but I think you are seeing a little bit already, right? You're seeing like General Catalyst has decided that Commuter is its vehicle, and they bought 5 or 6 companies in recent months, I think, maybe certainly in years. They're starting to build, and they're trying to figure out what can they build for this hospital system they're putting together in Ohio. And but to me, and you are going to see more consolidation and more people trying to sort of do a product suite that fits across an entire employer. I mean, take a Transcarent, right? Another well-funded General Catalyst company, which is now acquired a medical group by 98.6, and it's acquired. She started early on, acquired a sense of excellence, and is now, building an AI product off that medical group's information that can solve a lot of questions. They're trying to get to the point where they are an entire solution for employers to sort of displace point solutions. So I kind of see it going, but I think in the hardcore center of healthcare, the big hospital systems, there's a lot of people hanging out and saying, "Well, Epic says it's going to bring this AI to me. I'll just wait till Epic tells me what to do." And to me, that we have a very, very dominant vendor that's almost a monopoly for most of the big hospital systems. I mean, top 30 hospital systems are all on Epic now, or moving to it. And what they do is very interesting. They're of course not on the subject of this thing. They're in the middle of a interesting lawsuit, right, with the folks from Particle, which is gonna bubble away. There may be FTC investigation. Certainly Linda Khan knows it's going on. Was talking about it the other day. So, so I'm not sure that we get the consolidation at the rapid pace that accuracy and less I think we're going to get. But, there's always been consolidation. There always will be.
Great, thanks. And then I'm going through some topics at speed here. So the next one is, I think to the surprise of a lot of people, and it was very welcome, 2 top digital health companies filed S1s, meaning that they may choose to go public. And so this is Omada and Hinge filed S1s. And they had been rumored as being among the top 10 companies in digital health likely to go public. They were unicorns. They are well thought of in general. Their investors have been very patient, have been in them for a long time, and are probably clamoring to have a return. And so now what we'd love to know is that this is the beginning of 10 or more. I think PitchBook said there's 70 digital health companies that could go public, possibly. And so, but what do you think? Are these are these going to be good IPOs? Are they going to go up? Are they going to signal for 10 more to follow? Are we going to start seeing exits? And we want to see these exits because we want those investors to make money and then start putting that money back to work in young companies again. So,
well, from the finance point of view, exactly. And then we want to see these exits, and we want to see them because I want to see the kinds of services that, like those 2, are delivering and growing. I think at-home physical therapy is a tremendously good idea. I think it helps the healthcare system, helps the customer, and it saves money for the taxpayer and for the employer. So I like that. Same sort of thing with the suite of services Omada has put together. The problem is you've got a bunch of companies doing things similar who are on the public market already, who are not making money and are not doing well. So, I mean, right today, Teladoc stock is worth market cap is about $1.5 billion. So I don't know what Omada's hoping to go out at, but don't forget, inside of Teladoc is Livongo. Remember that? Remember then? And, they had many of the same features and services that Omada does as well. I don't honestly have them in looking sort of the blow by blow, day by day, who is selling more, weight management, diabetes care, and, high blood pressure, which they both had, and they were kind of competitive suites. Who's doing better in that market? But it's hard to imagine Omada is like showing spectacular profits and ready to go, therefore to be at a market cap more than where Teladoc Health is now. So I'm hopeful, and, for Omada, it's been a long time. Sean started that in 2010, I think. So it's, we're now 14 years into this. It's like 2 cycles in most regular tech businesses, companies. I was thinking about Blockbuster. For some reason, when I was thinking about Blockbuster Video, I started in the 80s, dead by the early 2000s. It's a 20-year life cycle of a company. 14 years of it growing to get to an IPO is a damn long time. Hinge is a bit less long. So I'm hopeful that you're right. There are 70 that could go out, but I also don't know. And also, I just look at what Maven did as we discussed earlier. Took a massive round rather than going the IPO route. And I'm a bit concerned that means that they had a look and decided they were better off to get on the sort of private equity route. But even those private equity guys got their money back next time. So I'll cross my fingers, and I hope I like these people. I wish them all the best. It's not like they're selling into a very bubbly market the way they were in 2020.
And we'll see. And so some nice things have been falling into place. We have record high indices in the stock market. We have the Fed lowering interest rates, and we may see some other companies IPO and cause some sizzle in the market. My understanding is that buy-siders want to buy IPO products. So the BlackRocks, the Citadels, the Fidelities of the world want to buy IPO product. But what they want is to know that that on average, they will go up about 15% and stay up. And that's not what we've been seeing. We've been seeing companies, they want high quality earnings companies that go up 15% and stay up. And then if that happens, they'll invest in a lot of those. And then some riskier companies can go out as well. But that's why
we have an N of 1, which is recent IPOs, which is Tempest, which has actually gone back up, and even though they're losing a tremendous amount of money. I don't know. We just don't have enough data to signal this. And honestly, that even the digital health companies, the Telodocs of the world and the project, those guys in general are up slightly from where they were earlier this year, but they were so far down that, and none of them are showing the basic business characteristics of what used to be an IPO back in the day. And the day was probably 30 years ago, that you had a bunch of profitable quarters and were growing both top line and bottom line revenue, top line revenue and growing the bottom line. And yeah, I mean, sure, every investor would like to buy into a company that's growing, that's growing fast and growing profit fast and growing revenue. We'll see if there are any.
So, and Brad has just asked a good question about, is there a role for activist investors to force some changes in some of the bigger healthcare IT players? And so we saw activist investors with some PE funds and Athena Health a while back.
Yeah.
And I think to my dismay, Athena Health was spending a lot on R&D, and the activist investors came in and said, hey, we have an idea. Let's give that money back to shareholders instead.
I mean, I mean, you're dead right? So Athena was not particularly profitable and was run. It was a sad situation because Jonathan Bush ran Athena as though he was the massive majority shareholder and controlled it all with a golden share, like Google or the guys that Amwell do now. And he didn't, right? So when an activist shareholder came in, a particularly brutal and unpleasant one in that case, Elliott Capital Management, run by, well, I won't go down the path there, but I'm not a fan, to say the least. But if you think about what they were trying to do at the time, they had just bought the system from Biffi's Rodicanes that John Alamka made, and they were working on an inpatient system at Toledo, I think it was. So that the R&D was going into trying to build a cloud-based modern alternative to Epic. That's where they were going with that. Mm-hmm. And because, and they were cut off at the knees, they pulled all that stuff out, they turned them back into a revenue cycle management company, which is, what they are, and they merged them with the old GE base. And yes, the investors made a ton of money. They flipped it to the next private equity company for like 3 times the value because, as you said, they stopped spending money in R&D and up to the bone and made it profitable. Yeah, well and good. Some investors who didn't need to get any richer got richer. And the healthcare system was deprived of a meaningful cloud-based modern alternative to Epic, which might have made a difference. I'm not saying it would have succeeded, but might have made a difference, and to me, that wasn't a good thing. And had they been able to be either being private or have been able to have, more longer term investors, you might have seen a more interesting company come out of it rather than what you've got now, which is just another revenue cycle management company with a few.
So he's asking, could activist investors, is there a role here? I think there's a couple roles. One is big HCIT players that are trading at rock bottom stock prices right now. There's an opportunity for a challenger management team to come in and run it differently. Then there's also a consolidation play as well, where you have a platform and you can buy up products to fit into your suite and probably pay a relatively low price to buy those products. If you have a great sales team, you don't need to buy a company with a great sales team. You just need their product, that sort of thing. So I think that's the opportunity, Brad. So just for time reasons, let me just quickly jump on. Our last, before we get to the main topic, is upcoming conferences. So here, I'll just dwell mainly on the health conference later in October 20th, 23rd in Las Vegas. So for our audience members, in general, I recommend that you attend this. The innovation economy, it's very good for education and for meeting investors, and also for seeing other vendors. Your competition are there. It's not a trade show. In general, you don't meet software buyers. You might meet innovation executives, but not software buyers with budgets. You don't meet hospital CIOs or hospital CFOs or health plan managers, but you meet health plan innovation executives and hospital innovation executives. But this is really about meeting with venture funds. And so I recommend that you make a list of all the venture funds you want to meet and write them right now this week and say, let's meet at Health. And you'll get a lot of those meetings. So that's, and I also find this conference to be fun and entertaining. I think Jonathan Weiner's biggest contribution was just, one was bringing many sectors together, and another one was making the topics fun. So anyway.
Plus you get to meet Halle Berry and Lenny Kravitz this year. One of three favorite one girls.
Are you going, and do you recommend that?
I'll be there. Sure, I'm moderating a panel. I'm also the Digital Health Hub Awards, which I'm involved with. Is going to be on the Monday night, which is always fun and interesting, sort of mini Oscars, if you like, a Digital Health Hub. And then I'll be there are a few drinks parties I may be attending now and again. You might catch me at one or two. And there'll be some good stuff on the main stage and the breakout stages, but it's also the way they organize it with the stages kind of in the exhibit hall. You call it not a trade show? It's a trade show.
No, it looks like a trade show, but it lacks some of the dynamism of a trade show. A trade show is you've got the vendors selling software present, but you don't have the buyers. That's an inadequacy of health, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a major problem, right? Because there's no need, there isn't as much need to go out and find out what's going on in healthcare as there used to be. If you are a buyer, it comes to you, and you're also locked into your. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure I agree with you totally about that, but you know, that's as a guy who used to run a big conference, that's always a problem, right? You have far more vendors who want to sell stuff than you have buyers who want to show their face to buy stuff. But health does a not bad job in having its buyer connects, called Buyer Connect series, and certainly they have a lot of investors there, and it's a very good place for vendors to meet investors. But you know, it's not bad. It's probably not quite where Hinge is on the hospital side, but outside of that, I think it's about as good as it gets.
Great. So now we're moving on to our main topic, which is a solution for higher healthcare costs, ? Americans spend more than anyone on their healthcare. There are only 4 ways to get costs down, but breakthroughs are tough. So you have a thesis as to how to solve the healthcare cost problem. Matthew, tell us your thesis.
I do. I'm not sure it's a thesis. What I have is I wrote I forget where this came from. I was either listening to something or I was on Twitter or something, and I wrote myself a note a long time ago saying there are only 4 ways to cut healthcare costs. Right? And the 4 ways are cut prices, cut use of services, get rid of unnecessary services, or replace high-priced services with low-priced services, right? If you go back and read your Uwe Reinhardt from 2003, we have the highest prices in healthcare in the world. We still do, right? It cost 5 times to get it replaced here than it cost in Austria. Libby Rosenthal wrote a book called Sick, which compared directly pricing, and she did a lot of work when she was in the New York Times. Now she's at KFS Health News, doing a lot of work comparing actual prices of procedures. Somehow we are paying more for stuff. And obviously the place where this has most recently been very evident is in the price we pay for drugs. Yes, we've negotiated now down the price of some drugs, but, not much. They're still double what they cost in other countries and not 3 or 4 times more if you're on one of those 10 drugs on the Medicare list. And my line here, Stephen, is that we should be paying, if we spent the Danish price for Ozempic and gave it to every American who needed it, we'd be spending over $100 billion a year. But if we spend the American price for everybody who needs it, we're spending nearly $2 trillion a year. So actually, it's going to be cheaper for us to invade Denmark, in my point of view, than to give every American Ozempic at the current price. So you can cut prices. It's really hard to do because of the political blowback you get, right? So then you can try and cut services. Well, that's pretty damn tough, cutting overall services, because Americans call that rationing, right? Then you can start thinking about, well, can you reduce only the unnecessary services? But of course, and we know from 50 years of the Dartmouth group and Jack Wimberg's work that there are the same patient with the same condition gets kind of 3 times a lot of services in Miami that they get in Minnesota. So theoretically, 2/3 of those services could go away if we all practice Minnesota-style medicine. We've known this for a long time. It's been very, very hard to enforce this and say that, the local medical cultures that drive more care in some areas and less care, and less services delivery in others are hard to do. And then the 4th one is kind of the Silicon Valley dream, which is reducing the, high price services with lower price services. And by that, I mean, go back to the conversation about Hinge, right? What is Hinge Health trying to do? It's trying to get physical therapy out to multiple people, making it accessible and easy and successful so that fewer people end up with it, which is cheap because it's software supported services, as opposed to back surgery, which is very expensive, right? So if you can get, I'm making up the numbers, you can get, for every 1,000 people you get on the system, if you can replace 2 or 3 back surgeries, with 50 to 100 grand a pop, the system probably pays for itself. We've struggled with all of these. We've known about all these for a long time. We've tried a gazillion experiments. Using, Medicare has run CMMI, the Medicare Innovation Center has run a ton of experiments, trying to do different things and pay people in different ways and do more home visits and do more primary medical, build a medical home for people, do more sort of shared savings with primary care, doing the ACO model. We've tried all different kinds of things, and we haven't really, none of them, I can't remember, they said there were 55 experiments they did, and only 4 or 5 of them actually saved money. And we've had the theory that we should be moving from, fee-for-service to value-based care, where we could reduce these types of, where we could encourage people to be more preventative and not use unnecessary services and, maybe cut the cost of individual transactions. And the healthcare system has been phenomenally resistant to that. And I have 2 classic examples, right? We have COVID and we have the Change Healthcare hack. Both of them stopped fee-for-service transaction payments to providers. And in both cases, the money, because it was paid in premiums, was sticking with health insurers or with the government. And in both cases, instead of the hospital systems and the providers all getting up saying, well, this is crazy, we only get paid when we provide, high expensive fee-for-service systems. And, in one case, we're now looking after people who have COVID, so we can't do the brain surgeries and the knee surgeries and the back surgeries to make, and the interventional cardiology to make all our money. We're doing this low level infectious care, which is not as profitable. So instead of saying, well, that's crazy, why aren't we paid to look after this whole population, whether they need back surgeries, whether they need infectious care? Or in the Change Healthcare case, well, the claims couldn't be processed, so we weren't getting paid, even though we're doing the same stuff. In neither case did the body and leadership of American healthcare try to stand up and say, let's get paid in a different way. Let's get some kind of global budget to look after the population in our neighborhood. Let's come up with something else that makes sense so that we're not vulnerable to this fee-for transaction stuff. They wanted to get back to normal fee-for-service as quickly as possible. So I see very little appetite within American healthcare for choosing any of those alternatives. And we'll probably, in my viewpoint, so my piece was intended to say, that's how you have to do it. There are no other levers to push. It's very hard to do the replace the expensive stuff with the cheap stuff. Maybe there are sort of Silicon Valley digital health tools that can work in that, but it's hard to do that. There's a sustained scale. And then the final piece is, you want to cut prices? Great. You are now going to go to war. And we are having this now. You can see it in the PBM negotiations and some of the questions from Medicare and elsewhere, and some of the drug price negotiations. You're going to go to war with very powerful political actors. And that takes a lot of political will from the executive and the Congress. And they haven't shown much of that for the last 50 years. 100 years, not that long. So I think, it's very much, a way to cut healthcare costs, question mark. What's the article?
So, and just to dwell on that, first of all, I agree with you that healthcare costs are too high. So there are some plus sides to high healthcare costs. So first of all, you could imagine if every society on Earth got richer and richer and richer, they're going to stop, their proportion they spend on food is going to go down just because the proportion they spend on other things. You might expect that as societies get richer, they'll spend a greater proportion on, say, entertainment and healthcare and other things. Transportation, food would go down as share. And also America is sort of paying for the innovation of the world. It's found a way to pay for it, which is that Americans pay more for on-patent drugs. And that's probably a good thing, since it'd be nice to say that the UN paid for healthcare innovation, and it was a huge success.
I actually disagree with that. The drug companies will tell you this is the case, but if you look at what drug companies spend their money on, 2/3 of it is spent on sales and marketing, and the rest, there's a big chunk. 2/3 is sales, marketing, and profit, right? So yes, they spend a big chunk in R&D, but I mean, you could still, if they didn't spend anywhere near as much on sales and marketing, and were prepared to accept lower profits, which the investors, I guess, wouldn't like. You could sell drugs much more cheaply You could sell them probably where Medicare's negotiated down to and have drug companies still make a ton of money. But they found it over the years more successful to spend it on sales and marketing. They still spend a lot more on that than they do on R&D. So you can argue America's paying for the world's R&D, but America's paying for the world's R&D and for the world's drug companies to be profitable and for a lot of sales and marketing infrastructure for those drug companies, which I'm not sure is very necessary, but it's been in baked, like the rest of the healthcare system's been in baked for a long time. To go to your earlier point, you do spend more on healthcare as you get richer. On the other hand, you look at some other high income countries that don't spend, now they're not quite as rich as they once were, but the Germans spend about 12%, the Swiss spend 12, 13%, the French spend 11% of GDP. These are not poor countries. I mean, not on a global scale. These are by no means poor countries. We've grown the proportion that we've spent. We were relatively a little bit richer than them back in 1990 when I got in this business. We were spending 13%. They were spending 10%. They've crept up, but we've crept up a lot more. The healthcare system as a whole has allocated itself a lot more money out of the rest of society because of some structural reasons that we know well than happens in other countries where the government has kind of kept a lid on it. I would say one other thing, which is true, and I don't know what we do about it given the state of our politics, but there's a bunch of stuff that shows up in our healthcare system that is counted elsewhere in other countries, right? We spend a lot of time dealing with the fallout of some social issues here, and I would include inequality, what that does to things like food deserts, our nutrition policy. I mean, we clearly have a lot of sick and obese people because of the way that our nutrition policy. We have people are starting to make a fuss about this. Believe it, in the Republican Party, some of the pro-Trump people now are talking about, well, we have all this processed food. We do, right? Americans just eat worse than other countries. You've got all the stuff that we eat is banned in other countries. Obviously, our social costs, the lack of social housing here and homelessness, that shows up in healthcare. There's a bunch of stuff that shows up in our healthcare numbers that probably is dealt with in other ways in other countries. So you can argue that that shows up in other parts of their social spending budget. But I think when it comes down to it, Uwe Reinhardt's point is true. We deliver roughly the same amount of health services as other countries on a per capita basis, and we charge a lot more for them. And that just means you're paying a higher price.
And let me jump to one last question, and then we have to sign off because you have your sexy conference to return to. So Charlotte asks, is there a fifth lever, which is to be healthier and reduce the need for medical procedures through lifestyle changes, emotional well-being, social services, nutrition, healthy food, community connections, healthy aging? What do you think?
I have two answers to this. One is, yeah, that might work. But you mentioned, Stephen, the behavioral changes, which is really, really hard to deal with. You have all these other things going on in society in America that make it very hard to do that. Going back to like how much I like ice cream. God knows what the chemicals they put in there to keep you addicted to the ice cream is, let alone the opiate addiction and the fentanyl addiction and the other stuff that's going on. So that's one. The second thing is, no matter how healthy people are, right? And by many measures, Americans are much healthier, several years ago. I don't think you can ascribe spending on health care, medical care, as being actually related to how healthy or sick people are. Because in some areas, we're much healthier, right? We have better, there are some segments of society we have drugs that, reduce cholesterol, and we have probably better data on heart conditions. There are some types of cancer now, which are basically treatable easily. Take HIV, right? Some areas where things were very expensive and now are not too bad. You manage it with generic drugs. The issue is you have a system that's set up to figure out ways to spend money, and it's going to find something to spend money on. And even if we all became, yoga, Pilates fiends who ate vegetarian meals and didn't go out and drink and smoke and, eat too much ice cream and exercise, even if that all happened, you could argue, unless we change the symptoms and structure in the system, people are going to find something to do something to us for. And, I think that goes on. And then there are things that we don't know how to healthicize our way out of, and I would include Alzheimer's and some of the cancers and that. that are, incredibly expensive and we really don't have a solution for. And there's no real evidence that having a better lifestyle means that you don't get. I mean, we cured one major cancer, lung cancer, more or less, by stopping many, many people smoking. We found some other stuff to do that costs even more money.
Great. Well, so for time reasons, I think we need to wind down, but thank you very much, Matthew, for coming on the show.
Thanks, Stephen. A great pleasure as always. I will look forward to seeing you in Vegas in a couple of weeks, where hopefully we can have intellectual discussion while we're having a beer, or maybe just have a bit. I don't know.
That sounds great. So you've been listening to the Digital Health Investor Talk show with host Stephen Wardell, and special thanks to our guest, Matthew Holt. We are publishing this show as part of the Digital Health Investor Show podcast. Subscribe on Apple and Spotify. Our next show is Wednesday, November 6th on The Consolidation Wave is Coming with Ari Tulla. Thank you. Bye-bye.